Thanks. I'm going to get us started. So welcome everyone to the Collaborative Mentoring webinar series. My name is Minnie Chen. I'm from Mentor National. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about mentoring LGBTQ plus youth and focusing mostly on implementing the LGBTQ supplement. So I'm really excited for our conversation with a great group of panelists and presenters. So before we get started, just want to share some housekeeping information. All attendees have been muted for the best sound, but again, we definitely want you all to participate as much as you can. So feel free to utilize the chat, change your audience to everyone so everyone can see your message if you would like them to. Say hi, where you're from, kind of what you're hoping to learn or get out from this webinar. Feel free to put that in the chat. And if you have any questions for our panel throughout today, also please utilize the Q&A function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. Live captions are also available in the panel by clicking on the CC live transcript. And so before we get started, we definitely want to know who's with us. So we have a couple poll questions for you to respond to. So our first one is, what is your experience level in the mentoring field? So are you a beginner, experienced, expert, however you entered, whenever you entered the mentoring field? Take a couple seconds to answer that. Okay, I'm going to close that out, share the results. So it looks like 30% of you all are beginners, 64% are experienced, we have 6% experts. So our second poll is your role in the mentoring field. So what best describes your role in the mentoring field? We know you probably would like to select several of these, but kind of in terms of what you most identify with at the moment. Are you mentoring program staff practitioner? Are you a mentor? Are you an educator? Are you a technical assistance provider, researcher, funder, or other? And again, if you haven't already, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and kind of who you are, where you're calling in from, and perhaps your role or your program that you work with. Great. And that poll, and then sharing the results. So it looks like majority of you all, 58% are mentoring program staff or practitioners. We have some others who are 19%, and then a mentor 10%, about 5% educators and TA providers, and 3% funders. Thank you all. And our last poll question is relevant to today's topic. So we want to know, have you used the LGBTQ plus supplement to the elements of effective practice? So no, if this is the first time you've heard of it, please say that. Have you looked at it but haven't used it? Have you looked at it but was overwhelmed? Or have you used it? Yes, and you've started to use it in your work. And no worries if this is the first time you've heard of it. We'll definitely be covering and having our presenters share a lot more about their experiences using it and kind of what are some ways we can implement it into our work. Okay, going to close that out and share the results. So it looks like majority of you all, 76%, this is the first time ever hearing it. So this is really great. You come to the right place. We have 12% have looked at it but haven't used. 10% have started to use it, and we have 2% that looked at it but were feeling overwhelmed. So I think today's webinar will definitely be applicable for hopefully all of you on the call. Now, before we get started again, this webinar is being recorded, and 1 week after the webinar, you will receive an email with how to access the PDF of the presentation slides along with the recording. You can find all the information on our collaborative mentoring webinar series on our webpage, so feel free to come back and check it out, along with past webinars are all located there. Lastly, please help us out by answering the survey questions at the end of the webinar. We always appreciate your feedback in terms of how we can continue making the webinars as useful and engaging as possible. And with that, I am happy to introduce Dr. Christian Rummell, who's a longtime collaborator with us here at Mentor and has had a great role with us in terms of creating this supplement as well as doing continuous trainings for the mentoring community. So I'm going to turn it over to Christian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Minnie, and thank you, everyone, for being with us today to hear a little bit more about the supplement, and even more importantly, to start thinking about ways you all could become more intentional and thoughtful in your support of LGBTQ youth. So we've got an amazing group of panelists, and I will be introducing them in a moment. And also a little bit of kind of background for why this work is important. So on the next slide, we'll kind of talk about the agenda for a moment and go through kind of what we're going to be covering over the course of the next hour or so. So the first part is really about the why, and I'll be talking a little bit about why it's important to do the work that's involved in the supplement, a little bit of a research background as to the steps that each of us can take to affirm and welcome LGBTQ youth into our programs and the importance of why we do that. The second part is a very brief overview of the supplement, and I'm very encouraged that all of you are here today, especially those of you that haven't seen this before, because it really is a pretty comprehensive roadmap for what you could do to create more inclusive policies and practices and climate for LGBTQ youth in your agency. So the last part of our conversation today is about how to actually use that. For those of you that have opened it up, it's about 80 pages or so. It's a pretty dense resource, and at times it can be very overwhelming. Even just the language that's involved in working with LGBTQ populations can be daunting for those of you that really haven't worked with this population before. So what we want to do is invite you in. And so as part of that, we're going to give an overview of some steps we took as part of a pilot that Mentor sponsored this year to really kind of allow agencies to get as much care and support in implementing that guidance from the supplement. So we've got 3 really amazing agencies that are representative of a pilot we did in Minnesota. We've got Jared Peterson from Kids and Kinship, and we've also got Xavier Vasquez from Boulder Options, and Nikki Hangleston from Queer Space Collective. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied at the moment. So really amazing group of folks that have been very intentional in their care, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing their stories and their experiences of being part of this pilot. So if we can move on to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the work that we're doing. Whenever we talk about working with LGBTQ youth, we really want to think about empathy. We want to find ways to invite people in to support this work. So for those of you that are from the community like myself, it's important to tell our stories. It's important for others to know what our experiences have been and why it's so essential to be able to find safe places. For those of you that are new and just learning a little bit more, understanding the research is a powerful starting point to understand kind of the things that are the status quo, the barriers that often are presented for young people trying to access support or receive services, or actually even feel a sense of belonging. So once you kind of go through those phases of understanding what the experiences of others have been through that have been marginalized or experienced shame, it builds empathy. All of us have had experience where we've been othered or placed at the margins. So by doing that, we know that there's a responsibility that comes. We have to act, we have to be allies, we have to make a difference. That's why we do mentoring. It's the whole experience of trying to make sure that other people that are growing up after us are able to access their possibilities, their futures, their hopes and their dreams. And that's what this work is about. It's about inviting folks in, making sure they're safe and affirmed, and part of the same experience that every other young person in our communities are meant to receive in our investments. So let's talk about the research for a moment. And this I'll do very briefly. I'm the dork here. I have to say, it's very clear for me. And you can see with the glasses, I'm making it known. So I want to go through a few little slides about the experiences of LGBTQ youth. And it's unfortunate. So Minnie, as we go through, just keep on clicking for the automations here. We know experiences at home are really difficult. We know that a lot of LGBTQ youth have had experiences where they've heard a parent or a family member say something negative about others that are like them. When you have an experience where your family is rejecting you or using negative messages about people like you, we know from research that you're more likely to report attempting suicide. You're more likely to have higher levels of depression. You're more likely to report illegal drug use. You're responding to that rejection and that shame. We know as well that there are a disproportionate number of LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness that are also involved in the child welfare system. Overall, what we have, the patterns that are existing, that are in place, are really about rejection. And that rejection can lead to long-term challenges, increased risk for distress, housing instability, systems involvement. But each of us can play a role in changing that, disrupting that, and being allies to make a difference. We know family acceptance is associated with greater self-esteem, less risk-taking behaviors, less suicidal ideation. Creating those opportunities for families to provide support to young people that are LGBTQ make a difference. You all in mentoring roles are very primed to support those relationships, to support how parents respond to and affirm their children. You're in a very unique position to disrupt what is an ongoing challenge and trend. We want to look at schools now. So on the next slide, we'll go through and highlight a few of the kind of day-to-day experiences that we know from research about LGBTQ youth. Schools are very hostile for this population. Young people that are growing up often feel unsafe. Almost 2/3 have experienced verbal harassment from their peers because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. They're more likely to be disciplined or receive more harsh punishment whenever they're caught doing something. Often they're skipping school because you feel unsafe. You don't want to go into a classroom where you're getting bullied and then you're getting punished at a disproportionately higher level for that. So that causes a pipeline into juvenile justice. So an estimated 13 to 15% of youth are LGBTQ that are in the juvenile justice system. Those negative experiences, especially for LGBTQ youth of color, are pretty profound in what they can do. And the reality is that we can disrupt that. We can make a difference. We know in schools that have supportive climates, that have GSAs, that have representation and visibility of others that are like the kids themselves, that there is a lower risk of suicide. So the reality is creating safe climates in a school setting makes a difference. Creating a safe climate in a mentoring program makes a difference. It disrupts the patterns and trends. It gives a safe place for young people. So the last place I'm going to talk about on the next slide is our national policies and our state and local policies, which are pretty harsh this year. I mean, there's no getting around kind of the experience that we've seen, especially with a lot of the bills that are coming out in state legislatures this year. So we know there are at least 6 states that have laws that say you can't even say gay in school. We know that there are approximately 30, and this number has been changing, states that allow conversion therapy, which has been likened to torture. We know that the Republican Party platform from 2016 and 2020 also supported that policy. We know that there are states like Mississippi, for example, that actually say it's okay to deny services to LGBT folks, that there is no reason and no punishment if you do that. So when you have those messages, young people internalize that. We internalize that. Instead of messages about inclusion, instead of messages about support, you're just hearing shame and being stigmatized. So people act on that. We know that LGBT youth have experienced verbal threats in their day-to-day, and almost 700,000 LGBT folks have been through conversion therapy. That ends up really causing a lot of distress. These policies, these messages, the cues that we receive about who we are ends up causing us to internalize that stigma and shame. And over a lifetime, we know that makes a really negative impact. And again, we can play a role as allies and advocates and make a difference by disrupting these trajectories by creating safe places. When you have inclusive laws, when you have inclusive programs, when you do some of the work that we've talked about and we'll share in the supplement, you disrupt this, you make that difference. And so again, by telling our stories, by those of us that have grown up in really difficult times because of who we are, by sharing this research, which shows that it's not just unique to one individual, it requires people to act. It is an opportunity for you in your messaging with others in your program to know that there is a role that each of you play in making a difference. So I give this overview as the why. And now I want to start talking a little bit about the what, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the how. So the what, really kind of going through the process of understanding that your program can make a difference and that we want to share a little bit more about the supplement. So on the next slide, I'm going to just give a very brief overview of what the supplement is and where you can access it and some of the guidance that it offers you as a mentoring practitioner. So first of all, this was sponsored by Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, Mentor. It was this real strong partnership from two of the nation's leading mentoring organizations saying we have to do better. And so the investment here was about looking at what we know are effective practices for kids and really looking at what could make it better and more affirming and effective for this population. When I did my dissertation 10 years ago, I found 4 programs across the country that were actually doing this work, that were really focused on creating these safe and inclusive programs. And the reality is we have 5,000 mentoring programs in the country now. And there is a movement. This work is part of the supplement. Big Brothers Big Sisters of America is doing a real intentional national campaign around this. And Mentor is also really being an advocate in sponsoring pilots like we just did in Minnesota. So to share on the next slide a little bit more about the supplement, it mirrors all of the pieces that we know. Oh, sorry. This is the team of us that was part of it was this all-star group. We have Nia Clark, who you'll meet in a moment, who was the coordinator at LifeWorks, who has been my partner and friend on this work. And we've got folks from the Human Rights Campaign, Gender Spectrum, True Colors, Tori Wieston-Surden from Youth Action Network and the GSA Network, all of these amazing folks looking at policies of inclusion for LGBTQ youth and giving their voice to this. So on the next slide, it really is the mirror of what we had in our the supplement as far as the elements of effective practice. It includes definitions, it includes resources, justifications, and a checklist. So for those of you that want to know, how do I design my program? There's a checklist of things that you could look at to make sure that this aligns. Briefly, I want to also highlight a couple of the things that are on the next slide, a couple of the things that really are reasons for you to start thinking more intentionally. And for those of you that are brand new to this, these are some of the things that come out in the supplement, and it's around inclusive language and giving folks cues that they're welcome and they belong. Folks like me end up believing that we can't be mentors, that we can't volunteer because of the history of exclusion that's happened over the years. So you have to create a welcoming message that says you are and can be a mentor in our program. We also know you have to come up with policies that screen out transphobic, biphobic, homophobic volunteers. Kids are coming out in your program. You can't just assume that someone is going to be safe and affirming if you don't ask questions to make sure that that would be the case. We know that you have to match based on gender identity versus sex assigned at birth. And if those terms are new to you, the supplement really starts to give some of the insight about what those differences are and the importance of recognizing matching based on gender identity. Also, give some ideas and suggestions for training your volunteers, especially around handling those critical moments. And then lastly, looking at referral relationships with partners. The goal of this is really around intentional program design and really making a big difference about how your agency can become more thoughtful in its care. So with that, I want to go ahead and pass this over to my partner on the pilot in Minnesota. So Basically, I want to share a little bit more. Again, Mentor sponsored this. It was something that we worked on over the course of this last year. We're very excited about it. And again, I want to pass this over to Nia, who will share a little bit more about the flow and how we set this up and designed it so that.
Thank you so much, Christian, for that wonderful introduction and for really sharing, that breakdown of the really critical data that, uh, illustrates the urgency that is needed to improve outcomes for this very vulnerable population. My name is Nia Clark. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or as I also say, I use the she series. I am a child welfare practitioner of 15 years. I actually started out as a foster youth. I was in the system for 14 years. And when I aged out of the system hired me. And so since that time, I've been a practitioner, I've been a child welfare consultant, and my area of focus as of late has been on mentoring, inclusion work, and working with vulnerable populations, including foster and justice-involved youth. And so I get it. I get the work that you're already doing, particularly in mentoring. As Christian mentioned, I worked for a program called LifeWorks, which is the youth development and mentorship program at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. And while there, matched over 200 youth with adult LGBT and ally mentors. So great to be on this call. Great to be. I can't wait for the discussions we're going to have today with the additional sites that actually participated in this project. But with that, I just wanted to spend a moment kind of talking about the how. So what is it? What do you do with the supplement essentially? What have we actually been doing with the supplement as we embarked on this kind of pilot initiative? So if we take a look at the next slide, here's kind of an overview. So we started out with assembling that pilot group of different sites in the Minnesota area. And we actually, Christian and I, we developed some online trainings. We actually did 3 of them for, in 2-hour sessions. The first really focused on awareness, because if you're going to embark on this work, it's really important to have a foundational awareness. So basic key terms, terminology, understanding what SOGI is, so sexual orientation, gender identity expression, having an awareness of who you're serving and what the population's needs are. And then moving into allyship. So allyship really being active allyship. So allyship being the verb, what are you actually doing, as opposed to just who you are and what you represent. It's how to be an active ally. So we had an opportunity to actually go over some role plays and some scenarios and actually get a chance for folks to do some cognitive processing on how you would actually address some of the issues that LGBTQ youth and the adults that support them face. And then lastly, having those conversations around creating an affirming program. So really looking at the policies, and because understanding that training is not enough. Training is only one facet of this work. We hear from Christian and I in our consulting work, we hear from organizations all the time who say, we need training for our direct service folks, for our frontline staff. And that is only one facet of the work that needs to be done. You all know what turnover is like. You all know, how, policy informs practice. And the opposite, practice informs policy. So it's so important to have beyond just the online training, but we wanted to actually introduce this idea of implementing policy and actually making some long-term changes on a mezzo and a macro level, looking at each agency. Next, we moved into online assessment because it's so important for folks who, understand quantitative and qualitative research, for folks who ever have to work with development. Assessment is so important because not only does it help you to assess your program fidelity, if what you're doing is in alignment with your mission and values, but it helps to know where the needle is and where the needle can be moved when it comes to inclusion work, not just with LGBTQ populations, but other underserved communities as well, that will be impacted by your inclusion work or lack thereof. So doing this online assessment was really key. So we had the Minnesota sites actually work on those. And then from that, we actually had the sites assemble their ally groups. So this wasn't just supervisors, this wasn't just folks in middle or senior management actually, assembling a resource group or ally group. This was everywhere. This was vertical. So folks from all different positions, from frontline management or administrative staff to their senior management staff or their board members, because that's really going to help you to understand what's going on programmatically, and also make sure that there's a shared vision, and you never know what resources are available. It's so important to be a conduit of information, and you never know who is comprised of those resources among your staff unless you offer this opportunity to others. So having those folks be part of those ally groups. And then Christian and we had some individual coaching sessions. So it was not only following up and finding out how the training went for the representatives from each agency, but figuring out what their baseline is based on that online assessment. It's finding out where they want to actually start some of this work. So, finding out that you may not have to reinvent the wheel, and that there may be some inclusion work that's already been done that can be translated, or the language can be parlayed to better serve this population. Next would be reviewing and updating policies. That's something that the sites are continuing to do because some of this work can't be done overnight based on your geography, based on your resources, but it's those reviews and updates that are still happening. And then lastly, the share out, and you're going to actually get an opportunity to hear some of that today. But we have been having meetings with the pilot programs just to hear what changes have been happening, what are the successes, what have been some of the challenges, areas of improvement, and resource sharing, because we can't do this work in silos. We have to be conduits of information. And so we started this work in February, and here we are actually continuing to do this work. So, you can see that this is more than just training. This is more than just a one-off training where we give the direct care staff that are having to have difficult conversations with youth. It's important to do more than just training, because you're going to do these trainings. Say, for instance, you do a one-off, and then all of a sudden you get questions from your own staff. Does our policy support these interventions that are suggested in this training? Invariably, it will always come back to policy informing the practice, and vice versa. With that being said, let's go to the next slide, please. So it's one thing to hear from Christian and I, but it's another to hear from sites that have actually gone through our training and our initiative process to actually report out on what their findings were, on what the experience was like. So this is going to be just a section to hear from 3 of the different organizations that were represented in the pilot. And so we're going to start with Jared Peterson from Kids in Kinship, who's going to give an overview of Kids in Kinship and also what their process of change has been like. So I'll pass it on to Jared.
Well, thank you, Nia. As I was introduced, my name is Jared Peterson. I am a program coordinator here with Kids in Kinship Mentoring. We are a nonprofit mentoring program located just southeast of the Twin City Metro in Dakota County. And you can kind of see here, I put in our mission value statement, just a little bit about who we are and what models we serve, 5 to 16 being the age of youth that are on our wait list. And we support those youth in a couple of models, the school-based and community-based mentoring. The school-based is a much smaller portion of our program, but it is a dynamic of kind of what we do and who we are serving here in the county. As you can see here, I just as a reference, I'm sure people are joining from all over, and their communities differ in ways of kind of where you're located, kind of the people that you work with, the youth that you serve. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot here in terms of the demographics for youth in the program, kind of also just reasons that the youth found us. So kind of system issues that might be going on or have been shared with us why they wanted an adult mentor connected with them through our program, Kids in Kinship. And then kind of just beyond this stuff, which I didn't get added in or updated before we sent this off, but I just wanted to maybe give you a snapshot, give you a clearer picture of Kids in Kinship and size, scope of who we're serving in the county. On a regular basis, the program serves around 70 active matches. So give or take 5 when we're closing or making matches on a varied basis. We have about 35 to 40 youth who are actively on a waiting list. So of course, those kids kind of come off the wait list and get matched, but on a regular basis, we'll be somewhere between the 35 to 40 youth waiting. Again, I think similar to many mentoring programs tuning in, a majority of those are boys waiting for male mentors. One unique thing with our program model, which kind of guides the way we support and make matches, is that we have the ability to make one-on-one mentor matches, the traditional model. And then we also invite couples and families to come and mentor youth in the community model. The school-based is the one-on-one approach with the mentor going to the school on a regular basis. Just to give you a sense of the size of the different models, the community-based certainly makes up most of our matches. Community-based mentoring, of the 70, about 5, I think right before COVID hit, we had 5 active school-based mentor models. And of course, with schools being in the state that they are with COVID, we closed several of those matches, but on average between 2 to 5 school-based mentor matches in our program. And I should also know, as has been kind of pointed out in the efforts to do this work, is to really better serve who is a part of our program, whether they're transparent with us or not on how they identify. But the parts of the process that I think really apply well is the structure, but can also be taken on by programs of different sizes, how old they are. And I think that was really representative of the Minnesota pilot program. Our program's coming up on our 50th year, so we're fairly established with a lot of old policies and procedures in place. And it's been fun to do. It's definitely more to wade through, but there's also, as you'll hear later, a fairly new program that is also a part of the pilot program from Nikki. She'll share more about what agency she's connected with. So we can go to the next slide, Minnie. One of the things that we were asked to do is just kind of key takeaways from our experience with the pilot program. And so we actually, as a ally team, I try to get sound bites from everyone on our ally team. And to give you an idea of what that looked like for Kids in Kinship, our ally team was all 4 staff, so 2 coordinators, a director, and a recruitment program manager. And then we also had a board member representative. And recently, about 2 months ago, a month ago, we added in a corporate partner into the ally team, which has been really an asset to our continued work on what we've already tackled. The corporate partner that came in, community partner, is a parent of a trans youth. And so not only did they give us kind of fresh eyes, they're getting to know more about the program, but they were also giving us a real unique lens on how we're thinking about our language and experience, how that might look like to someone coming to the program. So that was one really neat part of our takeaway in this work with the ally team. Other things in there, I won't read all these things. You can kind of scan those and see the highlights from the ally highlights. But one I will point out is right in the middle. Just even though you might think these will be rare in your program, if you might be a smaller program and you're like wondering, do I really need to do this work? I think what came and just out of chance that this happened, but right before we started, we had an occurrence with a trans youth that was enrolling, and we were going to match them, and we would just really wanted to be sensitive to how we did that and the approach, kind of our own policies that were in place. And then we had another match issue arise, which had a youth who came out, and there was some dynamics around the conversation that didn't go so well with that youth and the mentor. So these things will happen, they will come up, and I think the work is timely, especially for us, but I think for all programs to think about doing the inclusion and acceptance work that was guided through the pilot program. Other things that just quickly on other takeaways is just, again, I want to just echo the mentorship from Christian and Nia and the support from them. The hub was a resource for us, and it was just a place for us all to collect and share ideas, policies, and it just made the process seamless. And just really, I think what it boils down to for me is kind of what Christian shared earlier, is just the ability for people to be authentic and present in a real way, both for youth who are identifying or coming out, and also volunteers who have that skill, which often isn't openly, has a lot of open dialogue. I think it's just a beautiful way for that developmental relationship to take a kind of new level if everyone can be inclusive and accepting of those individuals. So just real quick, the wins and challenges. I know I don't want to take up too much time. You can, again, kind of scan these, get the highlights from our ally team. This was feedback that they gave us before we shared today. But I think the challenge, as you'll see here, and you're probably thinking yourself, like, is this doable? Do I have time? We are a team of 4, and we have lots of things going on all the time, fundraisers, events, activities, outings, and we have carved out time. We've really been intentional about it, and just maybe one secret ingredient that you can make this doable, or even more doable in your agency, is to incorporate it into your like strat plan or your ongoing agency quarterly plan that you guys might have. So if you can incorporate little changes, these being included in that work, hopefully, it just makes it a lot doable, like bite-sized approach to doing really comprehensive work. And then my last slide, here, the tips and resources. Again, sound bites from our ally team, kind of a collection of what we thought were really big takeaways for us all jumping into this. But the biggest one, I believe, was that parent coming on board and providing a really unique lens. And just a reminder, the work will be ongoing. So I know it might seem like a lot to take on at the beginning, but a big takeaway that we've just been reminded of is, even though we're updating a lot of things, we're coming out of this pilot program having updated forms, application, policies, but it should never be a one and done. I think if you have a good, well-run program, you should constantly be kind of updating and rethinking and become more sensitive to more and kind of unique situations, applicants, dynamics. So that would be some of my takeaways for tips and resources. And I'm sure there'll be more. If you want to ask in the question and answer, please feel free, but just glad to be part of this program, and I will pass it over so we can hear from other partners.
Thank you so much, Jared, for that thorough overview. It's so wonderful to see it, even on a slide, to see how much work you've done since February. So wonderful, wonderful work. So next I would like to introduce Xavier Vasquez, who actually works at Boulder Options. And so just going to share. So Xavier.
Thank you, Nia and Jared. Hi, everybody. My name is Xavier Vasquez. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Director of Program Management at Boulder Options. It's a youth mentoring organization that focuses on developing and nurturing healthy bodies and minds. And if you go back really quick to the previous slide, that's me right there 3 years ago, even though it doesn't look like me anymore. It's just that I've been learning about my gender expression, which is one of the takeaways that I've had with our trainings with Nia and Christian, and using the LGBTQ+ supplement to the elements of effective practice. Our mission is to teach youth to succeed in all life races, and we provide opportunities to promise youth so they feel confident and safe in the community. Our program, we can go to the next slide. Our program consists of one-on-one mentoring, where mentors and mentees spend 2 to 4 hours a week for a year. Our youth are set to pursue, and our youth set and pursue goals, physical and academic, during the year, and we provide all the events for them. We focus on developing, like I said, healthy bodies and minds through holistic and fun learning. We focus on 4 pillars: healthy living, lifelong learning, social and emotional development, and community connectivity. And each of these are equally important as the others to develop a well-rounded set of tools for life. Our youth that started the 1-year program are 10 to 14 years old, which is based on research. And for the years to like start that youth development, but also our alumni go from 11 years old when they graduate from the first 1-year program to whenever they want to stay connected with Boulder Options. We've had alumni that has come after 20 years, now they have a family. Alumni mentors and mentees, now they have a family, and they get connected to Boulder Options, and they're invited to our events. They're always welcome at Boulder Options. Our favorite saying is, once from Boulder Options, you're always from Boulder Options. Our youth are referred to us by any professional within community, and 80% of our youth come from single parent households. And next slide, please. These are the things that we've been doing at Boulder Options to do the inclusive implementation. We've been working with the guidance of the supplement, and we literally took the LGBTQ plus inclusivity action plan tool from the supplement and divided it in the meetings that we wanted to do through the year. The things that we're doing is administer inclusivity. So we send the inclusivity assessment to the Boulder Options staff and have them completed to see where we were at as an organization before we started to do any actionable steps. We also assembled allies and advocates representing cross-sections of the program, and we recruited 13 allies for the committee, and they vary in experience, background, and skills that can bring to the table. Our committee is composed of 7 staff members, 4 alumni mentees, and 3 alumni mentors. We review the assessment finding was shared with the Boulder Options staff so they could see where we're at as a team. And we identified 10 areas of priority areas for change so we can work through the year to make our organization more inclusive for the LGBTQ community. We review our practices and policies, like Jared mentioned, which is one of the things. So everybody, one of the first things we did before actually reviewing them was doing kind of like a strength activity. So everybody could see what are the things that they could bring to the table as a team member. And afterwards, we work with our process forms to make them more inclusive. We also identify our quick wins, and 3 of the quick wins we had right away after our training was we added our personal pronouns to our email signature and online presence. We added local referral and resources for LGBTQ plus youth and mentor materials, and then we located potential partners in our community. Also, we at Boulder Options, we've been reviewing our policies and procedures to make it more inclusive. And we created 10 new policies for the LGBTQ plus community at our organization. We asked all of the committee members to bring the name of one organization or individual that can partner with us to do more. And we mentioned our strengths as an organization, listed our needs, and for the next meeting, every member will bring ideas on how their partner can engage with us more efficiently based on what we need as an organization. We also had inclusive signage, LGBTQ plus inclusive signage at our gala on September 30th. Are in the process of ordering signage for our building to let people of color, LGBTQ plus folks, and people with disabilities know that our building is a safe space for them. Next slide, please. And then for the tips and tools, these are things that we've been working on at Boulder Options. Challenges, we're gonna have challenges going through this work. And These are things we've been trying to do at Boulder Options to not only minimize, but also create that awareness we were talking about. And one of them is stakeholder education, and we focus on educating our staff in equity, diversity, and inclusion, but it's equally important to educate our payers, families, board members, donors, and partners. And inclusiveness in all areas is what will take us to the next level as community builders, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is for our communities. Our organizations should study who their stakeholders are, and if they go along with their values, mission, and vision, and if they don't, then reconsider what our priorities are organization. Boulder Options, for example, we're trying to educate all our stakeholders, and if a mentor is not inclusive of LGBTQ plus youth, then at least in the Boulder Options, they're not allowed to participate in our program. One of the most important things about stakeholder education too is vocabulary shifting, from using pronouns to changing the wording of a youth risk. And it's one of those things that vocabulary is one of those things that can build confidence as quickly, and it can damage self-esteem. And it is extremely important to use the correct and inclusive language in our everyday lives, especially when referring to our youth and families. A safe environment is fair created with words, and those words will lead us to trust. And it has been a controversial topic, specifically in fundraising. And one of the strategies we've used in our committee was to make our development director part of our committee as well. And even though she is very inclusive, it showed her directly how important it is for our youth and our community to feel included, even in the wording of what we do. So it helped us implement changes quicker and more efficiently. We also, like I said, we review our policies and procedures to make them more inclusive. We created 10 more policies in the organization. And for innovation and flexibility, we shouldn't be fixed to a certain normal business. As community workers in a community that's always changing, we should also change every day in how we think, learn, advocate, and act. And it is easier for us to stay in our comfort zone and not bring new ideas to the program, but grow this directly proportional to innovation. And this is something that is necessary for our youth and families to feel safe in our organizations. And one of the other things we're doing is including our youth voice, and we should let our youth speak, lead, and express themselves more. They are the primary reason of why we're doing what we're doing. And there are community builders as well. But to honor our youth and their voices, we have to honor our authentic selves. They know who we are and when we are genuine or not. And once they create a rapport with their community, they will follow those whose passion and motivation feel genuine, because those are the ones that will display true happiness, which is at the end of the world was naturally what we're looking for. And the last thing that I have for the tips and tools are the community connectivity. It is crucial that we create a support network around us, because this work is a lot better if we do it together. For every person that will not support you, you'll find 5 more that will. And like Jared said, we have a platform called the Hub, where we post our updates that we're having with our organizations. I had the opportunity to learn from Nikki, from Jared, and other folks about things that we can apply to Boulder Options. Next slide, please. Then thank you for your time and the work that you are doing to transform lives and create safe spaces for our community. And here's my contact information. So I'll pass it on to Nia.
Thank you, Xavier. That was it was extensive, and it also kind of illustrates to folks that you don't have to be an LGBTQ plus org to embark on this work, and look at the breadth of work that you have taken on and some of those quick wins since February. It's amazing to see the amount of change that your organization has created in such a short period of time. So wonderful, and thank you for being an active ally. So thank you again. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it on to our last pilot site that will be speaking today. And that is Nikki Hangselben from the Queer Space Collective. It's important to see, like, not only are there mentoring organizations that have a focus on general populations, but also mentoring organizations that have a queer lens or LGBTQ focus. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to Nikki.
Great. Thanks, Nia, and thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today. So Queer Space Collective, we are a new organization based here in the Twin Cities. And Minnie, you can just go right to the next slide. Our mission is to create space for LGBTQ youth to feel safe and empowered to be their true selves. We just launched this spring, and it was perfect timing because we were able to participate in the LGBTQ Supplement while we were developing our own policies and procedures. So it was amazing to be part of this group and part of this learning to, figure out the best way that we can support LGBTQ youth in our communities. So Queer Space is a new organization. We're really here to help LGBTQ youth develop a strong sense of pride in who they are, where they come from, and where they want to go. We work collaboratively with a lot of local organizations in the broader LGBTQ community, and we match LGBTQ youth with LGBTQ adults. We're one of the few organizations in the country that really has mentoring focused on the queer community, and we're really excited to be part of this community and excited to be working with you all in this space. So next slide. A little bit more about Queer Space. We have both one-to-one mentoring where mentors and mentees are matched and they hang out in the community once a week for 1 to 3 hours. And then we also do a lot of monthly events where queer kids can meet other queer kids, and also so they can meet other LGBTQ adults. Most of the kids in our program, they don't know many other queer folks and are just excited to be a part of the program and be really building out their queer community. So next slide, and I'll try to keep this a little quick because I know we're getting close to time here. Some of our key takeaways, these are pretty tactical, but I think could be really helpful. So a lot of this is really building on what Jared and Xavier already said. But adding in identity and orientation in our preliminary questionnaires has been really helpful. I listed out there like the variations of identity that we have listed and orientation. And what's interesting is as youth and adults are filling this out, they often choose multiple identities and multiple orientations. So someone might say, I'm female and non-binary and identify as queer and questioning. So from a research lens, it might be a little bit more challenging to consolidate all of it. But from a inclusivity lens, I think it really allows folks to show up however they want, which is like really important in our programming. The other thing that we do is United True Colors has an LGBTQ homelessness 101 training that's free. And it's a 1-hour training, and part of it is around pronouns and systems of oppression, trans challenges. It's pretty broad, but it's a great 1-hour kind of fun training for all of our mentors to do before they even interview with us. And you can check that out. Again, it's free online. And then we also bring in a young trans person who does a transgender 101 and really talks about this with our mentors during our orientation training. We have reduced barriers for youth to participate by allowing them to opt in. And then also allowing not just agencies or therapists or case managers to refer youth, but also community members and parents. I would say half of our youth are referred by parents who want their kids to have, who like support their queerness, but they want their kids to have a stronger community and to have more LGBTQ adults in their lives, and to be able to see queer adults just living happy, healthy lives, right? Because that's not always portrayed, and the media are always portrayed in our world. And then the other thing we've been wrestling with, and we're still working on this, and all of this is a work in progress, but really trying to figure out how do we evaluate feeling safe and empowered, which is our mission. And we're working closely with Christian on this, as well as a few other researchers. But also trying to figure out, how do we really evaluate those feelings of identity, right? And feeling good about your identity and good about your orientation. And those are some of the measures that, will allow us to feel successful in this program. So there's not been a lot of research in this space. And so we want to, really use this platform over the next 5 years to contribute to the field of LGBTQ youth and those feelings around identity and orientation and kind of how that marries in with mentoring. So those are some of our key learnings. I think the next slide is just a thank you and my information. We love collaborating. I love having conversations with folks. So feel free to reach out if you would like to learn more about our programming or any of the initiatives that we're working on at ClearSpace. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. That also was so extremely informative, amazing. Like I said, you all were at the kind of inception of your, organization, and to see the strides you've made in the last few months is just awe-inspiring. So thank you for doing that work. It's so vital. It's so necessary. And thank you for sharing some of these, tips and strategies as well. With that, we actually do have a brief Q&A that we've allotted some time. So I'm going to ask Christian. So we actually have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I'm just wondering, how do we want to tackle this right now?
Yeah. Well, why don't we just go into the Q&A box? I can read the first question, and then Nia, you can do the second one. And
Awesome.
as things come up, we'll definitely address from there. So the first one, and this is for the panel, what does welcoming signage look like? So if you were to think about your agency, what does that inclusive kind of those cues look like for volunteers or young people that would be looking at your program? So I leave this open to our three panelists if you have thoughts, and also if you've made changes to your those cues, definitely share a little bit more about that as well, because that's important for folks to know that are thinking about doing.
Well, hello everyone. I've actually been looking here at the signage we started to order and the ones that we use at the gala. But we have, I know I don't have I have it in front of me right now. I can share my screen right now, but we have signage as everyone is welcome here. We had signage in our gala as all are welcome here, hope of equality, inclusion, and kindness, and that it's we are putting those outside of our building, very intentionally for people to see that our building is a safe space for everyone, and that also we had it around our gala to let our donors, partners, and everyone know that we are supportive of LGBTQ+.
Thank you. One thing I want to say about this is a lot of what we encourage is folks to develop an affirmation statement. So instead of just looking at your non-discrimination policy, that you don't discriminate against folks based on sexual orientation or gender identity, one of the key starting points is to say that you welcome, affirm, and want to include folks based on their sexual orientation and gender identity, and those different intersections that we each bring to being part of a program, part of a mentoring program. So using that language on your website, having that very prominently displayed is super powerful, because a mentor will look at that and say, yes, I can volunteer with this agency. A young person can look at that. Somebody from the community will say, oh, those are the values that this particular mentoring program is bringing to their day-to-day. And I either connect with it or I don't. And if I don't, I'm not going to sign up for this program. So it's even more important for you to do those steps early, because folks will self-select out if they are homophobic, or if they don't want to work with a trans kid, or if they feel uncomfortable then this isn't the place for them. And you will find that your volunteer pool will be even richer and better equipped to do the empathy that we're asking of them in that role. So I want to highlight that as one of the key things around welcoming signage. There's other things like safe zone posters and kind of looking at those kind of language cues, but that would be one of the first things. So that was a great question. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, thank you, Christian. And, you know, even something Christian is doing right now, Christian has updated his pronouns within his Zoom name. And that's something, an easy strategy. Something like email signatures. Are your pronouns in your email signatures? A lot of LGBT youth and adults, we're looking for those nonverbal cues that indicate that this is an inclusive and welcoming space. So thank you, Christian, for sharing your pronouns with us. That's an example of welcoming signage. We have another question from Charlene, who says, my agency is located in rural Appalachia. We've encountered some parents and guardians we work with not being accepting of their child, identifying within the community. I'm curious to know, what are some ways that mentoring programs and staff can support LGBTQ plus youth without outing them to their families and creating an unsafe environment? I would love to hear your ideas that you have of what has worked for you. I'm going to throw this out to the panel. What do you think?
I can jump in first, and hopefully if someone else wants to share or expand. But I know one thing that we wanted to accomplish in our policy updating is getting a confidentiality policy updated. And that is exactly to this point, tackling issues when these come up to make sure that that you keep your participants in mind and sensitive to the fact that we do not want that to happen, that if they are not ready, then that you as a program, as staff, whoever might be aware of that issue, or that the kid is coming out and there might be that dynamic of unsupportive parent, that the program staff keep that confidential. So we spelled that out with our confidentiality policy, which I have to say was shared around the hub. It was our resource center that agencies kind of gave feedback off what they had in place, and here's some ideas. And we really took that and made it within the Kids and Kinship brand, but you can apply it in many ways. And something that actually came out of our work of putting the confidentiality plan in place is that we actually made an internal document, which was how will the coordinators handle those situations. So kind of a, make sure this is in place, or if this is the case with the youth and the parent, think about the dynamics here, or what can you share between the mentor and the youth? Does the youth want the mentor to know? So it kind of created an additional document that wasn't so external, but more of like an internal guide, thinking through those so that you have an idea before it comes up. You might know you've thought through that. You're not just kind of addressing it on the, just quickly. You're thinking it through.
Thank you, Jared. That was great advice. Are there other, Nikki, Xavier, is there anything you want to add to that conversation?
Our program's a little unique because obviously everyone who shows up is queer, and their parents do, if parents sign off on it, on them being involved. We have been figuring out different ways, though, to support youth who don't have affirming or supportive families. But I do think one thing that we talk about, because the identity of youth are often changing, and so we talk about that during our mentorship matches around just kind of building what Jared said around talking about the confidentiality between the mentor and the mentee, and letting them know that it's a safe space for them to let their sexuality or their identity or orientation really evolve, and that it's okay to be questioning and okay to have those conversations with your mentor, and that those are confidential. And so I think just kind of talking about that up front just gives space for them to navigate some of that more easily.
Yes, Nikki. And I'm sorry, you're going to say something, Xavier?
Yes, really quick. So like Jared said, one of the most important things for us was doing that confidentiality policy, but also what we developed in our program was usually the intake forms, for example, were done with both the parent and the youth. Now we put everything in a tablet, and we make sure that the youth answer all our questions by themselves with no pressure of someone looking at it or something. So they have like the space to express to us. Also, we communicate directly with the youth after intake match meeting to make sure that that the information that we have from him, from them, is it's correct information, and we make sure that they are always included and feel safe and that they are heard in our program. So those are some things we've been doing after February, is making sure that they have their own space to actually talk directly to the staff, and that we respect and honor that.
Yes. Thank you, Xavier. That's so important to make sure that that young person has that space. And, it also makes me think, myself as a practitioner, making sure that, while we cannot necessarily control the outcome at home, we can help to ready that young person for difficult conversations. We can make sure to provide them and equip them with some language to possibly do some safety planning to make sure that the resources that are available to them in the event that they do come out at home and the response is negative. Those are all things that are within our domain that we can control, would be making sure that that young person is as equipped with resources as possible, and helping to ready them for even having that conversation. Okay, I'll pass it to Christian.
Yeah, well, and one last thing on that, I want to say there is a difference between mandatory reporting. So we have to share if we think a young person is potentially going to harm themselves or someone else. We don't have to share. And in fact, we may be placing a young person in harm's way or at risk by sharing information about their sexual orientation or gender identity with others. So recognizing that this is a very different part of the work that we're doing. And in fact, it actually is safeguarding young people and giving different layers to that. So I really want to highlight that too. We do this because, we don't keep secrets, but the reality is this is a very unique experience that you have to safeguard. And so the next question that's on our list is, do you have any LGBTQ trainings available? So for those of you on the panel, are there certain trainings that you found to be helpful, or are there, I know, Nikki, you had mentioned the True Colors United was one of the kind of resources that was suggested. Are there others that you all would recommend as well? And I can share for a moment while you all are, if there is anything. PFLAG is an amazing resource. They have an online academy that you could click on different links, and it has a lot of great information for folks that want to be allies. Gender Spectrum works with trans and non-binary and genderqueer youth and has a lot of great videos and materials available there. Trevor Project is doing some amazing work right now, and also has a series of kind of educational materials to implement. Is an activity called Coming Out Stars. And if you remember at the beginning when I was talking about empathy, this particular training ends up walking you through the experiences of coming out to a friend or a family member or your peers, or the experiences that could happen that are either accepting or rejecting. And it's a very powerful activity to build empathy around that experience of being rejected or stigmatized. And we encourage you to actually use it in your mentoring programs. And so there's a link to that from the supplement itself. So you can actually use that as a really powerful kind of strategy. We did it in our training with the pilot sites. The last thing I'll say there is that Mentor is planning to do more of these. So if you are interested, I would definitely encourage reaching out to your state or local partnership and let them know that this is something you would want to be involved in. If it does come your way, then we'll have your name on the list.
Thank you, Christian. So it looks like we have a question, but also an answer from Nathaniel. How are programs coordinating with systems of care, such as foster care, juvenile justice, and runaway youth orgs? Also, how are you messaging the services you provide to capture LGBTQ plus youth who may not have yet come out to their mentor? So Nathaniel, you actually have shared a resource on how to actually coordinate within those systems of care. So Human Rights Campaign Foundation, or Human Rights Campaign, is the largest LGBTQ civil rights organization in America. And they have an initiative called All Children, All Families. I happen to be one of the expert trainers for All Children, All Families. I've been doing trainings with them since about 2012, 2013. And so my partnership is actually what led me to actually work with Christian on the EEP supplement. Much of the our partnership actually has been with Human Rights Campaign Foundation as well. And so that is a great resource. There are some fantastic websites that you can take a look at if you're looking to include that lens of justice-involved youth, and you want to learn more about working with youth who are in systems of care. And some of those webinars are delivered by me. So there are some live recordings and that are available, and some pre-tape recordings as well. So I would definitely check that out. As far as messaging the services, Christian really talked about this. Xavier talked about this. Jared talked about this. These moments that don't happen in isolation, making sure that your website, those non-verbal cues are indicated to young people, because it's those things that indicate to us whether we can come out or not. And so it's just the messaging that we offer to let them know. And also even looking at observance days. There are LGBTQ plus observance days. Like today is Spirit Day. So this is, today is a day to really honor those who cannot come out, who actually need support. So what are you doing for Spirit Day? I would definitely check out and just to type into Google Spirit Day. Find out what all the observance days are for LGBTQ youth, and then figure out a ways to using your social media or making sure that your website is reflective of what your support is for those individual observance days. Christian?
Yeah, well, I think we're actually out of time. So I want to thank everybody for being part of the conversation today. There are some resources that we'll share. We'll look through some of the questions and come up with some responses to make sure that is out in the world for everyone. Really want to thank you for being part of this conversation, and want to especially thank our panelists for the amazing work that you've been doing throughout this year, and all of the inclusion that you are sharing with others as part of your coaching in this experience right now. Our contact information is on the last slide. Feel free to reach out to us. We really are happy to share more and to continue the conversation beyond today.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian, Nia, Nikki, Jared, and Xavier. Really appreciate everything you had to share. I know we had so many questions in the chat we weren't able to get to today, but we'll be sure to compile those, and hopefully feel free again to reach out to our panelists. And I know there were so many great resources shared in the chat, so we will also work to kind of compile those so you all can get those in the slides next week. And again, before we head out, just have a few more closing out slides. Of course, the LGBTQ supplement is on our mentor website for you all to access. You can download the full resource along with the checklist. And I will also add to this slide with everything else that folks have shared. And a few other resources we have here at Mentor. Our affiliate network definitely serve as a clearinghouse for training resources, public awareness, and advocacy. So we encourage you all to see if you have an affiliate in your region. All the panelists who spoke today are affiliated with our Mentor Minnesota affiliate. That's kind of how we were connected with them, through working with Minnesota affiliate. during this pilot. You can also recruit mentors by submitting your program to the Mentoring Connector, and the National Mentoring Resource Center is also another place to access lots of different evidence-based mentoring resources, along with the ability to apply for no-cost training and technical assistance. So please feel free to check that out. As a reminder, please help us out by answering the survey at the end of this webinar. Really appreciate all the feedback you are able to provide and for us to help inform future webinars. And you will also receive an email in about 1 week with the slides, the recording, and resources, which can also be accessed on our collaborative mentoring webinar series website. And this is also ways you can stay connected with us, and definitely feel free to utilize our panelists' contact information as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Really appreciate our panels and our speaker, and hopefully you can join us next month for our next webinar on mentoring in the national fight for racial justice on Thursday, November 18th. Thank you everyone so much, and hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.